to you.
Thank you, sir.
And welcome.
Thanks.
I yield back.
Senator Capito. Thank you very much, Mr. Whitaker, for being here, and thank you for visiting my office. I'm going to follow up on what my colleague from Vermont was talking about, because my local airport, Yeager Airport, has just been to Vermont to look at this, and I'm not using the same term that he used. They use the eVTOL, which is an electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. I'm assuming we're talking about the same or similar thing. So this would be next generation technology, but I think it holds a lot of promise really for rural areas to be the centers of excellence, and also the innovators here in terms of where we take this electrification on these types of vehicles. What kind of ideas would you have in terms of where the FAA might be able to be helpful in terms of building out? It's a different infrastructure that would be needed, just like electric cars would be different. How do you envision something like that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. In the case of Beta, it's an interesting case because I think they started as a eVTOL company, and now it's a fixed-wing departure. So they're more of a traditional aircraft design. They are dealing with the infrastructure issue by installing their own infrastructure at airports. But I think for the FAA, we're following the path that is being set by the companies. So as these companies need infrastructure for electric power and things, we need to be able to respond to that. But I do think it offers tremendous opportunity for smaller communities. The simplicity of operation means the cost is much lower. The maintenance is much lower on these types of vehicles. So it lowers your unit costs and opens up more markets. So I think it really is a potential opportunity for smaller communities.
I do too, and it's a much less cluttered airspace too, to
Absolutely.
be able to handle the innovation.
Right.
In 2020, and it seems like this is another never-ending story, but the FCC and the FAA and DoD have gotten into a fiasco over the 5G spectrum. This has created significant issues in this committee and elsewhere. I'm wondering, would you commit to being a strong advocate to try to seek to avoid these similar issues, sit down at the table and work these things out so that we don't lay it at the table at the last minute to try to decide what direction to go?
I would commit to that. I think collaboration is a good way to avoid a lot of misunderstanding and to reach alignment up front on difficult issues like that. So yes, I would.
Let me go back to rural. Thank you for that. Rural air service. I can speak from experience that it's contracting. It's not expanding in terms of availabilities. There have been some different companies that have come into play to sort of do niche kinds of things, which are great. This is great for an area such as mine. Do you see the loss of rural air service as an urgent problem, and how could you work to address that?
I think it is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. I think the pilot demand has been such that it has left smaller communities behind in some case. So I think we want to try to encourage as many people into this profession as we can. I think the rising salaries will help draw people into this profession. But we want to make sure we're supporting that effort as well by keeping the airports up to safety standards and improving them as appropriate so you can attract traffic.
Well, I think, too, on the pilot shortage issue, we just had a Women in Aviation expo around the state to try to encourage and have a broader reach to recruit more women, but also different types of populations into becoming a pilot. We have several pilot schools that have just kind of grown in the last several years, so I'm very encouraged by that. Let me ask you, in your prior experience at FAA, how many visits to the tower, how important is that for you to have those on-site visits, and how does that kind of inform your work going forward?
I was a frequent visitor to our facilities around the country, including towers, both in large urban areas, but also in remote areas, including contract towers. So I think it's key to hear the voices on the ground. Usually there are opinions about what technology they should have, but they don't have. So it's a good way to really understand at a ground level how the system's operating. Well,
I think, too, coming from a mountainous rural area, that having eyes on the runway is pretty significant in a place where I live. That fog can come in pretty quick, like it did last week, and we had to go back around and try again.
Right.
So I would just urge that it's amazing how much better the weather predicting has gotten over the year and how much more accurate. But as we move forward, I think those rural airports need to have that basic attention paid to them.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
agree. Thank you.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Whitaker, I would like to discuss the